Report live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance Sexton, Coleman training guru. Lance, you're coming to California, I understand, and we're going to update loan closing.
I'm incredibly excited, Bob. I've not traveled. My American Airlines status is not great because of a lack of travel, so it's going to be good to earn a few points and come out and see you guys. And the exciting thing is the award-winning closer training, Bob. We're going to get it up to date.
And we're going to do some fancy stuff. We're going to have our case studies that are going to flow through closing to, from underwriting to closing to servicing to liquidation. It'll be the same. I think we're going to pick on the poor Franklin brothers here. I see bad things happening in their future. Katie, good to see you as always. Let's get to
Bob.
it. We got what we're doing. It's Katie. What's going on? It's a light news day.
Yeah, it's a bit of a light news day. I think it's just being the beginning of the month. We just typically get more reports and less news, but today it is a light news day. So we're going to be going over what we covered on the restaurant webinar the other day, looking more into how the restaurant industry has changed and how that affects lenders.
Yeah, we thought we'd do that, give a recap of what Lance did yesterday. Go ahead, Lance.
I just want to ask you, did the Franklin brothers get a PPP loan, and, did they buy a new car with it?
That's interesting. I haven't got that far in my, but obviously for the Franklin Brothers is a case study that I've developed that came out from San Fernando Valley in California, where a lot of aerospace. And so we have a third generation company and they take it over. And Franklin was a guy out of World War II. I actually dealt with a guy like this. The first loan that the bank gave him was a Jeep. And he built up this wonderful company, sold to Burbank back when they were building the stealth high secret bombers, and now the case studies, these buildings, they're building stuff for Orion, and something bad happens. So that's our case study, Lance. So if it ends up in liquidation, that means we're sort of giving away the ending. Hey, quick, when is the loan considered past due? How'd they do, Lance?
They did great, Bob. In terms of being past due, 31 days is considered past due with SBA. Now, in terms of potentially going into liquidation, 60 days is considered the delinquent mark.
Right. But it's considered past due, and then we should have put in 30 days there, but it's 31 days and not 30 days. It's when it hits that next month's report, correct, Lance?
That's correct, Bob.
Okay. And Lance is going to be, the reason we brought that up is Lance is going to be talking about our past due webinar next Wednesday. And we're going to go through all that stuff. But when should a lender put this is PPP. When should a lender put a PPP loan into liquidation status? Joseph, you didn't have your coffee this morning.
So we're talking PPP loans.
PPP only right now. Choices are when the business closes, 26% when the borrower ceases communication, 5%, 15% when we refuse to make payments with a pending forgiveness app, or when the borrower hits 60 days to 54%. That was the majority answer. Lance, how'd they do? Trick question.
Fine, Bob. There are multiple answers to this. The only one that's not potentially an answer is when a borrower is not making payments with a pending forgiveness application, because they're not required to. If the business closes, that's considered a technical default, so it could be put in liquidation status when they hit the 60-day delinquent mark. That would be considered an appropriate tickler to put in liquidation status. Ceasing communication, probably not going to put it in liquidation status yet. unless unless we find the business is closed or it hit the 60-day delinquent mark. Now, SBA is supposed to, and I've read a couple of articles and heard from people, supposed to issue some additional guidance on servicing PPP loans in the very near future.
And that's the other part of the answer, Katie, is we don't have the guidance, correct?
Right. We're still waiting on that. And like Lance said, the SBA has indicated that they're going to be issuing that guidance very soon. But currently, we're kind of just holding off and waiting. But that is something everyone's very excited to see and see what we're supposed to be doing with these loans.
Well, we
Lance,
need a
go ahead, Lance.
we need a clear indicator of how to get the guarantee paid, what kind of purchase demand we're going to have, and clarity on, I mean, they did provide a little guidance on when you can submit for guarantee purchase, but they have not provided any guidance on how.
Very good. Yes, and that was really the purpose of the question also, is to say, hey, we have no way of doing it. We have no way of putting in a liquidation status. Is that really the correct answer, Lance?
You know, Bob, it'd be fun to go in E-Tran and see, but I'm not willing.
You're not willing to do it?
I don't want to do that at this point, but, you know, I'm certain that putting it in liquidation status will probably require us to go into E-Tran and change its status. And that most likely is going to be what will allow us to submit for guarantee purchase.
Okay, so we've given a lot of fuzzy answers, but let's give a specific answer. Lance, I get hit with the business is closed we find out it's closed as of Friday. What do we do on June 5th, 2021?
I'm going to stick a memorandum in file.
And are we going to send an email to SBA, to the servicing center?
Yeah, you can send the email to the SBA Servicing Center. You're most likely not going to get a response.
Which I don't care, but that way we're officially putting them on notice.
You're notified, correct.
Okay, so that's what I would do. I would put the memo in file. Hey, we're on top of it. And
you are, if you get notification, Bob, they filed bankruptcy, you are required to notify the appropriate servicing center in that case.
Lance, the takeaway on, we call this the new normal for restaurant financing. We read a lot of different stuff in the paper. I read another one today, an article that the economy is going to be rocking and rolling. It's all over the board, but the reality, restaurants still close. And I think the numbers were, so we don't have that poll question, so I can say it, 80% of restaurants close within 5 years of operation. Those that do survive do very well. It's a very nice loan product. But we sort of got everyone on this one yesterday. What is the number one reason for restaurant failure? I'm sorry?
Including me. I don't know if you remember.
That's right. We got everyone. But then again, this is my poll, it's my opinion. So there. 30% of my owner gives up. That's what I say. Restaurant runs out of cash is the more, at 55% is the more prevalent answer. But I maintain you can run out of cash, you can still operate, you can go, you can find other sources of cash, you can scrounge, you can beg, borrow from family and fools. But the bottom line is if the owner gives up, the owner gives up.
Yeah, that's Bob, I agreed with the 55% people. I felt like if they ran out of cash, they were in trouble. But
well, yeah, and I'm not saying that's a good thing.
But after thinking about my response, probably the most important one is having an owner that's all in. And you're exactly right. They could go to friends, relatives. They could borrow money from PayPal or Cabbage or whomever.
They could go knock on the door of their landlord and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah, there's a variety of things, but if the owner's not all in, that's a problem.
Right. And that's what. I'll go back one slide. Those other one is, don't forget this one. As lenders, where's the lease? We take the lease and we throw it in the file. Read the lease. Some of the restaurant operators' best practices are what makes for a successful restaurant, which is the opposite of this question. And the answer is a favorable lease to the tenant. If you don't have a good lease, you're in trouble, Lance.
There's no question about that. And I would imagine there were some pretty favorable leases put in place during 2020 when tenants were moving out and potential new restaurants were moving in. On a personal level, my dad had a new restaurant tenant in one of his buildings, and of course it was a very favorable lease just to get somebody in.
A friend of mine, his payments weren't that large, $3,000 a month. He was struggling, and so he took $1,500 cash in the bank, went and met his landlord and said, here's the deal. Take the $1,500 cash now, call it clean for this month. Otherwise, I got to move. I'm closing down. Guess what the landlord did, Lance?
Took the money.
Took the money. Very good. The takeaways that we had for the restaurant business is it's changed. These were everything we discussed, but I want to discuss specifically the numbers. Okay, this is the new normal. And what this represents is, Katie, the ghost kitchen. But if you look at it, we deliver DoorDash, we deliver with Postmates, there's a crawl. But in this case, they're not having sit-down people.
Yeah, so ghost kitchens definitely was something that took off. They were already getting somewhat popular before the pandemic, but the pandemic did make this really take off more recently. And what that is it's a restaurant operation that can no longer or chooses to no longer operate with sit-down dining. Instead, they are entirely delivery or takeout. And that's definitely something that during the pandemic, a lot of them had to do. And you saw a lot of people getting very creative with this. You saw them opening in places like closed down hotel kitchens that weren't operating at the same level they were before. They would allow somebody to come in and share the kitchen and operate a ghost kitchen out of it. So were some very creative ways of managing that situation.
The reason why we put this, go ahead, Lance.
That ghost kitchen concept has me thinking, when you have a larger restaurant facility with a big kitchen in it, you could almost do a restaurant incubator and have multiple restaurants operating.
Absolutely. And they're different brand names and different operators. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to see those concepts. Reason why we put this chart up is not all restaurants are created alike. And full service is down 30%. And those usually the sit down, the fine dining, the Applebee's, where you sit down and leave a tip. Limited service was only down 6% because they already knew how to deliver stuff in bags and drive-throughs. And bars and taverns were down 65%, Lance. A lot of people, the other restaurants said, hey, you want your alcohol? We'll deliver it. You don't have to go anywhere to get it.
Well, and here's the interesting thing with a statistic like that. I did a couple of liquor store loans in 2020. Bars and taverns were down, but liquor stores were way up.
Absolutely. Total revenues were down 24%. We were looking for a change dramatically in 2021, 2022. 90% of people still want that experience. The demand will continue, unlike we're unclear of a lot of other stuff's going to come back, such as movie theaters and business travel. It's going to come back. Will it come back all the way? We're predicting restaurants will come back all the way and exceed where they are. People just want that experience of going out. This is sort of a sad statistic in that one of the fallouts of this thing is that you had well-established operators, maybe a second generation, but they've been in business for at least 30 years, and 16% of them failed, which tells me they were unable, unwilling to adapt, Lance.
Yeah, I think this is an environment, Bob, where I always talked about this in my small business lending seminars that I've done over the years. If you have a borrower that walks into the door and says, we're going to do it this way because we've done it this way for the last 30 years and it's worked, that attitude does not work right now. So, people had to adapt, had to be nimble to be successful in the restaurant business.
The one thing that's not coming back, Katie, is employment. We're saying they're going to start hiring people, but the bottom line is there will be jobs lost in this that will not be filled.
There will, and especially going back to that ghost kitchen example, you're not going to need as many servers and things like that. And if those operations were working better than before the pandemic, when they were having servers at each table and people bussing tables and everything like that, they might stick with that. And I'm definitely seeing, at least locally, we're getting places. We've got a new Greek restaurant that all they do is delivery.
Right.
Things like that are definitely opening up, and that's going to reduce the number of employees who are working at those places.
Joseph, go to the next slide. And then 110,000 restaurants were closed permanently during COVID. And these are some of the takeaways that we had yesterday that the entrepreneur needs to embrace, which is off-premise food service, streamlining menus, reduce your costs, setting up outdoor dining, marketing discount, bundling and blending meals. Very important to have a strong delivery service and selling the alcohol to go. So it's the bottom line, Lance, is we're bullish, but it's going to change.
Restaurant lending can still be a great category. You just got to have an owner who has the right business plan.
Very good. Let's see, and the one comment, Lance, we don't have this, but I think one of the things to determine, we presented yesterday characters of the first C in restaurant lending, which means, as we said, the borrower is willing to go into 401ks, get another job, do whatever they have to do to make your loan payments. They're the ones that strike the check, and they don't strike the check, the loan is obviously going to be an issue. But one of the things you can quickly find out, how do you define character? Well, the SBA says make sure they haven't been arrested, and we went through all that. But one of the ways also is how well do they understand their business? And Lance, what is the most prevalent off-balance sheet question we want to ask them? It's the cost of goods sold, and I want you to tell that and how your dad operated that as well as lease payments. Those are three great metrics that a loan officer can focus in on in 30 seconds.
Well, the cost of goods sold is so critical for a restaurant to be successful. They need to have their food costs managed well and their labor costs managed well. And the percentage I like to throw out is a little less than the industry standard. The industry standard's about 65%, Bob. I like to see them have food and labor costs combined be around 60 to 62%. The other metric
that goes directly to the bottom line, to the bottom line.
Well, and the other metric is the building itself. The lease payment or the loan payment on the building typically does not need to exceed 10 to 12% of total revenue.
Yeah,
that doesn't come from an RMA book, Bob. That comes from a father who operated a restaurant for 28 years.
Right. And that's why, but the importance, I'm not necessarily interested in the answer, although I do want it to be reasonable. I'm more interested, does that person know it? Lance is coming in, he says, and now he no longer sits at the desk, but he'll pick up the Zoom call and say, hey, Lance, what were your labor costs last year? And if the gentleman or the lady hems and haws.
Well, and if they say 80%, Bob, that's not a good project.
Okay, real quick, let's finish up with a number of comments and questions. Russell says, I always love Russell's comments. Restaurants often disappear into the dead of night because they have nothing to protect once they run out of cash. The owner gives up as a result, not a cause. All right, Russell, I'll take that. But I'm not saying that being out of cash is good, but that is a cause. Steve says, you mentioned if a borrower enters bankruptcy, we need to notify the servicing center. Would it be the same requirement if the owner passes? The answer would be,
Yes.
you mentioned yes. Jody asks another question on this, which is great. If clients were approved for an SBA loan today, or let's say May 2021, but don't close until after July 1, will they still be eligible for Section 1112 payments? Katie or Lance, do you know that?
Yes.
The answer
The
is yes.
Section 1112 payments are still supposed to extend to September 30th. I've not heard any differently. So if you close the loan today and get it dispersed prior to September 30th, they're supposed to get 1112 payments.
We want to get a sneak preview tomorrow on Fraud Friday. Katie, what's the story you're working on?
Yeah, so we're looking at, once again, some bookkeepers, and we've looked at bookkeepers for a while. We've had several cases where money seems to walk away, especially when they can go ahead and write their own checks. So we're going to be looking into that once again.
Yeah, and that's important because that is entirely off balance sheet, but it's a reason why a business could fail. Hey, shout out to John. John's not here. You notice that? He is taking his wife to a doctor's appointment. I'm sure I am breaking all sorts of laws, but let's just say he'll be lighting up a cigar in about 8 months. How's that for a teaser, Lance?
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, John.
Congratulations, John. All right, very good. Thank you all for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.